Hi, I'm Alick, the CEO and founder of Osper.
Hi, I'm Lily, the CEO and founder of MyBnk.
Hi, I'm Tom, founder of EdAid.
Hi, I'm Sharon, Professor of Personal Finance Capability at the Open University Business School.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here. I understand you've just come off stage, had a hot debate about how we educate young people in this sector. What's the key takeaway? What's the key campaigning message, if you like, to young people, to the next generation?
Right, first I'd say don't speak just before lunchtime because absolutely everybody was stone cold asleep. So I think that's the first thing. If you want to get something difficult across, let's have it first up rather than last up in the morning. I think it's such a broad audience, addressing them and inspiring them. I think there's so many things that, from a thought leadership perspective, that can be of benefit to what we're doing, and then these guys implementing it to Alick building something. The people around the table here actually have a lot of the solutions. Mm-hmm. How we scale those solutions, I think, is a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what we might take an offline and talk about a bit more, because good ideas are great, and the thought leadership about how we solve the problem is how we actually then take that forward. I think it's the kind of takeaway from my side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a resonating sense that there's an appetite to accompany all these technological innovations with a sound layer of education and using them as an enabler for people to improve their financial situations at whatever stage of their life they're at. The idea is, how do we work in a coherent way? How do we create collaborations and efficiencies and scale?
I think that's a really important point in terms of starting from where people are, whether it's a young person or a child at school or an adult, and thinking, what does that person want to be able to do? How do they want to be able to do it? And that should be our starting point really for development, so that actually we engage people, because that's been one of the key issues so far, I think, is that we talk about financial education, but that's quite a turn-off for people. It's thinking, okay, well, how do we convey those messages to people in a way that's actually engaging and attractive and makes people want to think and talk about it?
Yeah.
So I think, speaking to Alick and the guys here from the panel, from my side of things, that there's a lot of talk about how you gamify, you inspire young people to use games in education. I think it may be outdated or may not even exist anymore, but there was a great game that was out when I was studying maybe 15 years ago called Drug Wars. Okay, and it was someone that had hacked together something essentially, but essentially you were a drug dealer and you were running around making drug deals. But and then you essentially and it was a very much kind of desktop Windows-based game. But you actually learned the value. You understood, and someone who always enjoyed the value of money from a young age anyway. I'm probably the exception, but so many of my other friends they got into financial literacy by playing this silly game called Drug Wars, and it was very viral before we had apps and everything else. And so I think that if you can make things relevant, but this idea of just over gamification sometimes, it makes things simple. I think that we have to be quite acute in finding which audience, where we're going to stop the rot and start the solution, because we can't cater to everybody. I mean, you can't say there are as many young people with financial problems, if not more adults have financial problems. Young people have a fresh start. I think that we can carry the conversation on. We educate children, and then they go and ask their parents for advice, and their parents aren't able to give them the advice. And Lily, you made a great point that earlier when we were chatting offline about that financial problems, there's a rush for the bottom, isn't there? That they compound so that people that are the poorest have the least access to financial advice, support, and are the least literate, and that becomes a fight for the bottom rather than something that was being uplifted. Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting. When we started working on Osper, we went out and spoke to hundreds of parents. And we explained to them that we wanted to build a company and a service to empower young people to manage money responsibly. And time after time after time, the first response that came back from parents was, "Can I have some of that, please?" And it strikes us that in trying to educate and empower young people, you've got to recognise that we've actually got to take their parents on that journey too. And one of the reasons we're doing this is because the parents, the adults of today, you and I, we've all made mistakes with money. And so we've got to recognise that if we are going to work with young people, how can we help their parents build up the confidence to know that they're pushing and nudging their children in the right direction. And being realistic about the fact that as a parent, along with all the other responsibilities you have, whether it's making sure the kids do their homework, pass their exams, don't take drugs, or play drugs, or as it were, they actually also just teach their children to manage money. And so for us, that means you've got to design solutions that are really simple, they're very easy to use, they're convenient, and that's when you can actually get a conversation going. I think it's very easy when we think about financial education to overcomplicate things and miss out on how do we teach 3 or 4 basic concepts like saving for a goal, knowing about a rainy day, managing within a budget. Like those 3 or 4 things, if we can teach every young person in this country 3 or 4 really basic concepts, I think we've done something magical.
And how do you generate that groundswell? Because this group, I can imagine peer recommendations are really important. How do you generate that excitement and interest and, aptitude to use those tools?
I think the answer, ironically, is you don't. What you do is you focus on building a great product that really works, and then you let the people who use that product go off and share it. So in our case, we allow parents to refer other parents. We now have over 1/3 of all the people who order Osper cards coming through referrals. Over 85% of those referrals come from mums telling mums, and they happen within 24 hours of actually a parent ordering an Osper card for their child. So there's obviously something resonating with parents today and with children about this idea of financial education, financial capability building. I think if we overthink how we drive this well, we'll forget why we started it in the first place, which is we just want to build a great product which really has impact on lives. So that's our answer, at least.
I think it's really interesting because at the Open University we've been involved in developing some personal finance modules which people can access free of charge online, and we've been really surprised at the uptake of those modules because we've got the first one was called Managing My Money, which is a fairly basic kind of introduction for adults in terms of the different things that you might need to know around managing money, bank accounts, credit, insurance. And we had, in the first run of it, we had maybe 10,000 people sign up. And not all of those people went on to take part in all of the course. It was very flexible in that way. But actually, I was really surprised at that. There's clearly an appetite out there for people to say, I want some of this information. And we had loads of interaction on the forums where people were asking questions of their peers and, wanting to discuss these issues. So I think there is an appetite out there for people to get that information, but perhaps as we were talking about, people not quite clear where they can go to get that information at the moment.
Do you think there's a role to play? When I studied, we had to do a course called BITS, which was basic information technology skills. Everyone had to learn some basic programming, some basic database management, regardless of faculty. And that was 15, 16 years ago now. Do you think there is a requirement that our institutions should be making basic financial literacy a core module in the first term of every undergrad?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting idea. But one of the things we were talking about on stage that I think is really important that Lily was saying was actually it's not just now about financial education, it's about digital skills and actually how those two things interrelate. Because in order to manage your money in the future for all of us, that's going to require a much greater level of digital skills about understanding how your data is used, what security you need to have in place, and all those kind of technology things that we'll need to know as well as the finance side.
And picking up on that, presumably this sort of concept goes further. We need to get presumably more people younger people wanting to enter the financial technology space. As a career, presumably. Are you seeing an increase in interest in doing so, or what are the barriers to that, do we think?
Well, my colleagues won't forgive me if I don't give a plug for this, but the Open University is actually working with Innovate Finance to develop a course called Understanding Financial Technology for people coming into the financial services sector to actually help them to understand the impact of fintech on their industry and the work that they do and how they design products and so on and so forth. So I think there is a bit of a gap there. The need for the education is kind of fairly broad-based, and it's about educating the workforce as well. I think that's right.
I actually think, plug for MyBnk, because I really want to hear about how they really put, I think, young people at the heart of everything that you've done. And actually you drive a lot of the education through young people, which, having taught myself, I find is the best way of young people learning, which is off one another. So I think that's a great example of actually the power of getting young people involved in the service. Well, I'd love to hear more about what are the things that you've learned actually having young people deliver financial education in some ways to other young people.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of multiplier effect because we go into schools, we get young people to run their own banks in schools. So effectively we train the youngest bankers in the country who are often 11, 12-year-olds, and they become bank managers for their peers who get into regular habits around savings. And this is one of the programs that we do. And the others are all about trying to make learning about money memorable and exciting. And our motto is every young person must be wowed. So we do a lot of combination. So we'll bring sports and financial education together, and we'll create sporty financial education and deliver that through government schemes during the summer, but also through schools. We'll bring digital skills and financial education together, again to make the experience more memorable and relevant, and to prepare young people for the world of work, where there are 10 million empty jobs in tech, but also where we need a new way of thinking to penetrate financial services. And we need young people to get excited at the thought of saying, you know, I could work in this industry, I could change it, I could contribute in that way.
And on that wonderful, inspiring note, can I have one thing from each of you on what you'd like to see for Innovate Finance Global Summit 2016?
2060?
Yeah. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Starting with me as well?
Yeah, Alick.
Oh wow, lucky me. So one
thing you'd like to see happen over the next 12 months, or, you know,
right.
One key prediction from you.
I think I'd like to see, if we have this panel again next year, a young person sitting on this couch with us. Actually, it's not very, like, I think it's all great, us as passionate people trying to empower young people to bring their voices to the table, but actually there's no one better than them to talk for them. I think there's a lack, I think we underappreciate what young people are capable of when you give them the tools and you give them the opportunities. And you know, actually, rather than me, I'd rather have them sitting here speaking. So that's my one thing, actually more young people.
Lovely.
Yeah, I would add to that and say let's co-create a program with young people and Innovate Finance that's the sort of 5 a day of financial education for the nation. And let's showcase that next year.
Brilliant.
I think for me, if we can get to a situation whereby, as one of Lily's students said, why do they make the small print so small? Small print should be banned. Any information that you need in a financial product should be brought up front and centre to the page. So I think if we can work collectively on some standards for financial information, that would be incredible.
And finally, Sharon?
I think it builds on what Lily and Alex said, actually. I think if we could come back next year and say, actually, we now know that there are this suite of programs or this set of things that are happening out there, and we've actually proved that they work, and we prove that they engage young people and help them to live financially healthier lives, and that would be fantastic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Alick, Lily, Tom, Sharon. Thank you for your time. Lovely to meet you.